Age for Success Radio, raising the profile of employee engagement and shining a light on good practice for people who believe there's a better way to work.
Hello and welcome to Engage for Success Radio and show number 589 on our weekly series. Engage for Success is a not-for-profit movement and the UK's leading voice on the topic of employee engagement. We're out there raising awareness and running events through our area networks right around the country, and our topic and sector-specific thought and action groups are developing research, publishing case studies and highlighting all the best practice that's going on out there. To find out more, please visit engageforsuccess.org. And while you're there, why not sign up for our weekly newsletter? That will ensure that you'll never miss out on any of our excellent free resources, events, and updates. And I'm Andy Gorham, your host for today's show and the founder of BizJuicer, the employee engagement and culture change consultancy that helps growing organizations become stickier from the inside by helping them attract, keep, and develop great people. Now, today we're exploring how AI is not just transforming businesses, but also democratizing access to one of the most powerful tools for growth, coaching. Coaching used to be seen as a perk reserved for a privileged few. But today, and thanks to AI, personalized development is becoming more and more accessible for everyone, helping to embed a culture of continuous learning, coachability, and resilience across organizations. And I am delighted that joining me today is Vidhi Thacker, Global Director of Talent and Organizational Effectiveness at VML. Vidhi is a truly global talent leader, having worked across the US, the UK, APAC, New Zealand, and India. And she combines deep psychological insight with really sharp business acumen. And she's also a passionate advocate for inclusion, co-chairing the VML UK ERG for LGBTQIA+ communities and allies. Now, today, together, we'll dive into how AI is helping employees become more coachable and why that matters and what it could mean for engagement, agility, and organizational success. Vidhi, welcome to the show. It is lovely to have you with me today.
Thank you so much for having me. 589 episodes. I mean, I knew it was a lot, but that's quite a number.
That
Such an honor to be here and having, this platform to share my thoughts and learn from the group as well, learn from you as well, Andy.
Well, I'm all for learning, and I read out that number whenever I do these shows, and yeah, it's staggering the number of shows that we've done. But today, this is the most important show that we are doing. It's a final bank holiday, and here we are talking about AI and people and coaching, and I'm really, really keen to get into all of that. But before I do and run headlong into some questions, I gave a little bit of an introduction to you, Vidhi, but why don't you just give us a better flavor of who you are, what you do, and where your focus today is?
Yeah, thank you. I mean, that introduction was fantastic. I'm going to download this podcast and keep it as sort of a motivation for me every morning whenever I'm like, oh, yeah, that's a good boost of confidence. But no, I am, as you've said, the Global Director for Talent and Organizational Effectiveness at VML, which is the world's largest creative company, which is, a fun place to work at. But I am an organizational psychologist by background. So I got my master's in social organizational psychology from
Mhm.
Columbia University in New York. Had the awesome privilege of working in the United States for a while. And then, as you mentioned, all of these global opportunities have really truly made me appreciative of fantastic cultural differences and people I get to work with and learn from. I've had experiences both in internal and external HR consulting, but I think I find it really rewarding to be on the inside of organizations to see projects come to life, to see people whose lives get impacted by it. And yeah, it's wonderful to be here and to share with you around this as well.
I think that perspective that you bring on both sides, if you like, of client and let's use the word consultant. It's not a dirty word. We'll use it. It's fine. Um, I think that gives a really interesting perspective, particularly on maybe on this topic, because you can't avoid the topic of AI. It's absolutely everywhere. There's lots of good spoken, there's lots of bad, there's naysaying, there's evangelists, there's optimists and skeptics all over the place. So it doesn't really matter who you are. it's an interesting conversation to have, right? Because you either love what's being said or you're triggered by it. But I wonder whether we should just set the scene a little for today's conversation. So if I draw it back to coaching, I sort of said in the intro that in the old days, coaching was kind of just for the select few. You're an exec, you got some coaching. But it's no longer the bastion of that leadership group or specific high performers, is it? And specifically in all the work you do, how is AI changing that landscape, Vidhi?
No, absolutely. I think that that to me is the most powerful thing about coaching, right? We've known that it works
Mm,
because people who have so many years of experience find it the most valuable way of growing, developing, changing their behaviors, changing their patterns, changing how they lead, adapting to the requirements. And so we know coaching works. Then why was it obviously only the highest echelons of organizations that got access? It was absolutely because of the cost involved, right?
yeah,
Like when
yeah.
there's a human being spending their time, energy, and attention to help you with your very specific problems or areas of growth or whatever it is, it requires both financial and time investment. Now that's why it's been treated like a reward all this time. And I'm preaching to the choir here. Everyone who's listening probably knows this. But the truth is that you shouldn't just be rewarded by coaching. It's the
Mm.
tool that can help you get to the places you want to, right? And again, I think with AI, it is absolutely 100% democratizing it. Now, before we go forward with this podcast and anyone says, oh, AI is out here to get my job and is not, as a coach, am I even relevant anymore? That's really not sort of the area that AI is going to thrive in the sense that it's not taking a coach's job away. However, what I think AI is starting to do is all of those individuals who did not have access to a coach, it's making them coachable early on in their careers
Mm.
at different points in their journeys, so that when you do reach that specific level where you need human intervention and you have complex team dynamics you're navigating, and AI may not be the right coach for you at that point, but before you get there, to help you be sort of open to change, to be even open to modifying behaviors or experimenting with how you show up. Democratizing coaching truly helps. And AI tools that are available, video based AI tools, chat based, audio based, they're just so powerful, and they help kind of open up our minds to things that we weren't exposed to before because we didn't have access to a coach.
I think that I want to come back to that coachable thing later because I think that's quite an interesting topic to get into. Um, and I'm really interested in what you said about people's jobs and it's not taking the coach's job away. I'd love you to sort of get into that a little bit as well. But if I think back to where my experiences with AI have kind of gravitated and perhaps where we're most used to it, most of the conversation in this sort of type of AI tends to sort of show that or be talked around efficiency, automation, if really trying to make those things simpler and speedier.
Hmm.
And I was speaking to someone the other day. I mean, recruitment is dealing with AI a lot.
Hmm.
And there's lots of people just handing over the keys to recruitment to AI. And as the person I was interviewing said, yeah, I can automate stupid for you, no problem. Unless you've got that grounding in there, um, you're going to make bad decisions faster. But when it comes to coaching and career development, I think you've made a great point that this personalization, this bespoke nature of it is really important. But then we combine that with the efficiency and automation associated with AI. How are we keeping that human touch,
Yes.
which I think is probably the most crucial element of coaching, the connection that you have with your coach or the person or, as a coachee, and selecting the person who's going to maybe not just make you feel great, but push you out of your comfort zone into growth. How do we accentuate that? How is AI dealing with that, Vidhi?
Yeah. No, that's a great point. So I'm actually going to reference Jerry Seinfeld. He just recently did an interview with Jimmy Fallon. I don't know if you've caught that, but he said something around, we're smart enough to create AI, dumb enough to need AI, and then confused not to know where to use it. And I think that is so beautifully captured, right? And I think that's also the dilemma with with this specific instance, when do we use AI? When, is it going to be human enough? And I'm doing air quotes right now. Or is it, or is it taking the human away, right? And
Yeah.
I think there is risk. It would be silly of us to not acknowledge that there is a risk. But because it is intelligent and it is evolving, some of the technologies that I've been using know what its limitations are. I think
Mm,
let's start there.
mm,
When you're dealing with something as sensitive as coaching, and it's sharing everything around what you might be going through with your performance, your team, or any concerns, you are getting into territory around, let's say, well-being, emotional distress, and so on and so forth. And so many of the AI technologies that I've been working with will tell you, hey, I think this is not the place that I'm going to be most helpful, but I can recommend these resources and these people. So
mm.
first, right off the bat, I think those guardrails that some of the vendors we've worked with and some of the technologies are setting in place, already like a big sigh of relief as an HR professional, because we don't want to get into legal trouble. We don't want to
No.
see a headline saying, XYZ organization hired or fired based on AI, and then we all get into trouble for many, many reasons. So that's right off the bat. The second thing that some of these technologies that are so intelligent are doing is that they're learning from whatever you're giving them, but also adding sort of the bias free nature that a coach may not always be able to offer, right? So if I'm getting coaching from my manager, um, they're learning about me. My manager has my history, but then my manager also has their own point of view, their own approach, and so on. What some of these coaching tools are doing is saying, hey, I'm taking you in, I understand these are the things you're having, this is the quality of being human, and I'm not human, but I get you. At the same time, I don't have all this baggage that any other human coach or
Mm.
whoever might come with. So even as the coachee, I'm more likely, we're seeing at least, employees are more likely to be open to the advice that a coach is giving, or to try something the coach is giving, because it's not coming from another human being. And so I think that's quite unique and beautiful. And then I think these technologies are training up to understand emotions, to even the video based functionality, the voice based functionality is trying to capture your language, your accent, the changes in your tone, to say, hey, I think you might be feeling XYZ, am I correct, or help me understand better. So I think as I said right off the bat, there are human coaches that they're not replaceable, but these AI coaching tools are making us more open to being coached, and therefore ready for that human intervention when we get there.
I think that prep piece is fascinating because, from what I have seen and people I've spoken to, actually, AI can be great in those in the moment situational support moments.
Yeah.
Like, I'm dealing with this person, it's not going right. They've got this going on. What would you recommend? And that instant feedback. And for some people, not having someone face to face means it's a little easier. It's less judgy potentially.
Yeah.
There's less, like you say, less unconscious bias going on in
Yeah.
the advice that you're getting.
Yeah, and if I may, I think you started this question, or sort of this theme around sort of efficiency and automation,
Yeah,
right? Now, to me, what AI coaching is doing is increasing efficiency and automation when those difficult conversations need to be had, right?
yeah,
Because you're getting a safe space to practice. I mean, we always talk about how, let's say, managers play such a massive role in whether employees are engaged, whether
yeah.
they're happy, they're satisfied, whether they're, fulfilling their career vision and purpose. There's so much pressure on these managers. And while not everyone's a cardiac surgeon or a pilot, they still have an impact on human lives. And so,
Yes.
wouldn't it be wonderful if you can practice how to show up, how you're showing up, how you're going to have an impact on your direct team, just like cardiac surgeons and pilots have simulations? AI is now giving you the opportunity to practice that conversation, get feedback on it, very much real in time feedback that you can then take back. So the sort of the coaching becomes very situation focused as well, not all hypothetical.
Yeah, I think it's that situational practicality, pragmatic support that people will, I think, respond to. And I am in wholehearted agreement. No surprise, being a volunteer at Engage Success, that the managers, I think, have one of the toughest jobs around. Being caught in the middle of all the strategy people, having to listen to that and understand it, and then translate it down to the people on the floor who need to get stuff done, who maybe don't want to do that stuff. I mean, that is some tough going. Um, but I do think the point you make about prepping, because if coaching had only been available to the upper echelons, then people weren't used to the sort of questions or thinking for yourself or working some problems through in this sense that, a good coach will make you do, will bring the answers out from you. So I think that prep stuff is great. And maybe I said I wanted to come back to your point about being coachable.
Mhm.
This practice, learning about being open to feedback, actually learning about yourself, putting that practical self-awareness stuff into practice, and putting yourself in situations where perhaps you're a little bit uncomfortable with it, because that's where all the growth comes from. I mean, that is a critical training ground, right? And do you see AI really kind of tweaking those buttons, really helping people with the coachability, getting used to in that pattern, being questioned, not as a confrontation, but as a pathway to growth?
Absolutely. I think there's two things that I found quite fascinating in my personal interactions, as well as hearing from people around us who have been using AI coaching. First of all, unlike some of these AI tools like GPT that we're
Mm,
familiar with, these coaching tools that are in the market these days are relentlessly curious.
mm.
They're asking so many questions before they give you, again, I'm doing air quotes, the right answer. As in a coaching engagement, that becomes so important that they're seeking the response from you, and therefore they're making you a critical thinker.
Mm.
And they're not saying, hey, I'm going to serve all the answers to you, which is a fear we have with AI. It's going to make us stop thinking because we asked the question. But these coaching tools do mimic what a real coaching conversation, and I say real again with air quotes, human coach, AI coach, is it all real? But it is a real coaching conversation, and so it's making you think, it's making you be open to change, it's making you ask questions, and so therefore stay coachable, be open to change. The second thing is it's genuinely trying to understand you as a person. So I mean, I can give you an example. There was
Please.
a manager that told me that she used one of the solutions that we offered at VML. And she said, hey, I have this team member, she's fantastic, she gets work done, she's an amazing execution focused individual, but what I'm experiencing is that she is not proactive. I want
Mm.
her to come to me with ideas. I want her to tell me when she disagrees. She just wants to go ahead and do what I ask her to do. But I think I want her to elevate. And so she's talking to this coach and saying, how do I deliver all this feedback? The coach provides her all of these scenarios. They do a role play. She has a plan. She's ready. Before she ends that coaching conversation, this tool says, hold on a minute, before you do this, I do have one last question. And then they actually go on to have another 30-minute long conversation whereby they discover that this individual in reference versus the manager come from very different cultural backgrounds.
Yeah.
And so all of the stuff that the manager was perceiving as not proactive is really just in their culture would have been seen as insubordination if the individual behaved the way the manager was expecting. And so the manager now had to become open to modifying something about themselves
Yeah.
and not just expecting that from the individual, to say, how do I create a psychologically safe environment where this employee now feels, hey, this is different to what I'm used to, but it's okay, I'm not gonna suddenly lose my job for saying I disagree with you. And so the coach unlocked this. Now, potentially, this manager may not have faced that about themselves or the cultural difference if they weren't aware of it until much later when they had a human coach. I mean, I don't know how else it might have played out. But the fact that this coach said, hold on a second, you need to do a little bit of deep diving too, to me, that was really, really powerful.
I think that really is powerful. I mean, a lot of theories that get spouted around in businesses are very, I guess, culturally biased. Not in a bad intention, but just, oh, I work in here. It's a Western focused stuff.
Mhm.
Actually, the workforce today is more globalized than ever before. But I might not have a deep understanding of South Korean culture,
Mhm.
and which, I mean, as Netflix will tell me, because Netflix thinks I am from South Korea. I think the amount of South Korean programs I watch, which, by the way, listeners, are excellent. They do make a good drama,
Oh,
but
yes.
but you could easily put your foot in it. and say the wrong thing or give really poor advice. Whereas these kind of cultural nuances,
Mhm.
that's where our AI can add some huge value to both the coach and the coachee, right?
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. It can draw on this large data pool of how people behave across cultures, but then also when you're having that individual conversation, zoom in and say, actually, you may be an anomaly, or you fit right in to this norm, or you need to, all of this context that you come with has impacted you in such and such way. And any human coach may not have that data set to
Exactly.
work with, which AI does. And of course, we can, argue both ways around the pros and cons and so on, but it's definitely an advantage.
I
Absolutely.
think so. I think so. I think this is where I I definitely feel I'm in the optimist camp.
Yeah.
This is not a T1000 coming to steal everybody's jobs and
No.
in the world in my head. It's what we make of it. I really, really, truly believe that's what we make of it. It can enhance a lot of things.
Yeah. And like, for example, when I'm speaking English to you right now, but I grew up speaking a different language, right? And my husband speaks a different language, even though we're both from India. And sometimes when I'm really, really mad at him, I start speaking in a language he does not understand. And that's a natural human thing to do. You revert to the emotionally more accessible behaviors, languages, so on and so forth. A coach will not be able to understand some of these things, a human coach, right? But AI coaching, there's tools that can change up to 100 languages. They detect
Mm,
when you're switching, and therefore they can try to understand some of the like there are words in Hindi that are not translatable in English or even Gujarati or so on. And these coaches will pick that up and say, hey, is this how you're feeling, or the complexity of the emotion, right? And that also adds so much beauty to the way that you're being coached.
I think it comes back to this personalization. I was with a client only the other day, and it wasn't about coaching, but it was about learning and development. And they were recording some videos for some content, some learning development content. And the AI tool they were using was absolutely incredible because not only did it change the language, and they were particularly talking about all the various languages within Indian because they have a big Indian culture, particularly in their sort of I guess their airport businesses, particularly, and the AI was changing the language and lip syncing like amazingly well.
Yeah.
So it felt really personalized and natural. I mean that is incredible. I know it's not coaching, but we're so early into this AI journey, and things are kind of moving at such a pace.
Yeah.
And you keep using the word learning. It's learning all the time.
It is learning all the time. I mean, the concern that comes when when we say roll out to employees is it learning about me and my
Mm,
privacy concerns and
mm,
all of these things. Some of these tools out there are not training their technology based on the human conversations. There's all of these like security clauses and things that you can test for. So anyone who's listening who's considering, hey, should we be rolling out AI coaching to our organizations, these organizations know, these vendors know all of these privacy concerns, and they're addressing it, which I think again is important. However, at the same time, the AI is learning about you. And there are some of these technologies that also connect my coach to potentially my manager's coach,
mm.
right? And so some of these data about how I am expecting my career to go, even if I'm not always able to have that conversation with my manager, my coach and my manager's coach will talk to each other and create sort of this team profile for my manager to navigate. So that again adds to the beauty of all of this.
I think so. And I know we've talked about the sort of situational stuff in the moment stuff, but I guess this can really apply to some of those bigger transitions that we make, like particularly with return to office stuff or big career shifts or new departments and stuff. Are you doing stuff like that yourself? Have you witnessed that sort of thing going on?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, a couple of different things. We're obviously a marketing agency,
Yeah.
creative powerhouse. So, a lot of our work is client facing. So, we've been using some of these AI technologies to support with preparing for important pitches or presentations and getting feedback on how you're showing up. The other area we've also been using AI technology is to help employees understand their personal brand, to navigate, when they receive feedback, how to translate that feedback into a development plan. Then
Mm.
you set a goal, and how do you get reminders and nudges and are held accountable to achieving those goals. And then finally, I think, as you mentioned, return to office as well. How do I plan my calendar, my schedule? How do I adjust my life and routine? How do I get the best advice and access to resources? So coaching can help with that as well. And for managers, on how to practice having conversations around return to office and catering their approach to different needs of people on their team. So the use cases are absolutely endless. And we're just as you very correctly said, at just the beginning of our journey. I don't think the AI is primitive. We're just primitive in
Yeah,
our use of AI. It's
that's
ready, it's
great.
waiting for us to kind of unlock the potential it has, but there's endless applications for sure.
That's such a great point to make. And I think even if I personalize the AI, my own AI use, it's not that I'll ever take or always take its response as 100% complete, but it puts me in the ballpark or gives me a creative idea, or it just gets me closer to my own tweaks, edits,
Yeah.
than it would have done on my own with a blank sheet of paper. So I think if you apply that to coaching, whilst the question might not be 100% right, it might absolutely put you in the right sort of ballpark, get the right sort of thinking,
Yeah.
provoke you to ask different questions, or just provoke you to have a conversation in the first place that you might not have done.
100%. Yes, you're so right on that. Like it makes you want to, or it makes it required for you to think slightly differently than you would before. And that in itself, even if it's just 1%, I mean, if every single one of us is thinking 1% differently,
Take it.
that's a
Come
win.
on. It's better, right? It's better than yesterday, and that's what we're looking for. You can't help but to have a conversation about AI without having a cheeky little glint in our eyes and go, "What's the good stuff and the bad stuff that is there anything like incredibly surprising that you've come across so far in either a good sense or a crazy sense when you've been picking out tools or using things, or how people have been using them?"
Yeah, I think the trust factor. I think that, I mean, and we know the change curve. There's always those early adopters who are going to jump right in. But the trust factor across global usage, I think that's been the most fascinating for me. Initially, people are skeptical, but once they jump in, they treat it as its best friend. They talk to them about everything and anything, and they just feel more comfortable than they would with a human coach. And again, I think nobody's jobs are at at risk here. Human coaches are always going to be required, but we're making people open up, become ready to have conversations around things that make them feel vulnerable, and establish trust with a coach. How do you even have that relationship? How do you open yourself up to it? So
Incredibly important stuff, trust, in so many facets. Vinny, before I let you go, I have just one final sort of question. If someone's listening to this thing today and wants to go back in the office and I don't know, start to build their culture of coachability or coaching in general, make it more accessible to AI, what's the very first thing you'd recommend that they do?
I think try all of the different tools that are available. For experiment with them and become more aware of what your concerns with the tools are only, and that'll only come when you use it. And then it's going to ask you some of these questions. And everyone's offering free trials, so just set yourself 30 minutes a week to try a new tool. Try it for 4 weeks. You're gonna walk away with four new technologies that you didn't know before. And I think that that itself is going to open up that 1% shift we talked about, Andy.
I love it. Just dive into the pick and mix that is AI right
Mhm.
now and have some fun. Vidi, I have loved having you on the show today. Thank you for sharing all of your wonderful insights and experiences. If people would like to find out a bit more about you and what you're up to, where can they find you?
Sure. I'm on LinkedIn. So Vidhi Thakker. I don't know if you can see my spelling, but it's VIDHITHAKKER. And then also you can reach out to me on my personal email, which is my first name @ first name, last name. So vidhi@vidhithakker.com.
Marvelous. Well, thank you so much for coming on. It's been a pleasure to speak to you.
Ooh, this has been fun. Thanks so much for having me, Andy.
Okay, you take care, Vidi. Okay, everybody, that is all we have time for today. Unbelievable. Don't forget to visit engageforsuccess.org and check out the show notes and explore all the free employee engagement resources that are there. And don't forget, you can also download or stream any of our previous episodes there too at your leisure. We'll be back at the same time next week. I'm Andy Gorham, and thanks for listening to Engage for Success Radio.
Engage for Success Radio, raising the profile of employee engagement and shining a light on good practice for people who believe there's a better way to work.